Chapter 10 of Book 2 of Prior Analytics by Aristotle, translated by Octavius, Owen. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Jeffrey Edwards. Chapter 10 of the same in the third figure. In the third figure, when the conclusion is converted contrarily, neither premise is subverted according to any of the syllogisms, but when contradictorily, both are in all the modes. For let A be shown to be with a certain B, and let C be taken as the middle, and the premises be universal. If then A is assumed not present with a certain B, but B with every C, there is no syllogism of A and C, nor if A is not present with a certain B, but with every C, will there be a syllogism of B and C. There will also be a similar demonstration, if the premises are not universal, for either both must be particular by conversion, or the universal be joined to the minor, but thus there was not a syllogism, neither in the first nor in the middle figure. If however they are converted contradictorily, both propositions are subverted, for if A is with no B, but B with every C, A will be with no C. Again, if A is with no B, but with every C, B will be with no C. In like manner, if one proposition is not universal, since if A is with no B, but B with a certain C, A will not be with a certain C, but if A is with no B, but with every C, B will be present with no C. So also if the syllogism be negative, for let A be shown not present with a certain B, and let the affirmative proposition be B, C, but the negative A, C, for thus there was a syllogism. When then the proposition is taken contrary to the conclusion, there will not be a syllogism. For if A were with a certain B, but B with every C, there was not a syllogism of A and C, nor if A were with a certain B, but with no C, was there a syllogism of B and C, so that the propositions are not subverted. When however the contradictory of the conclusion is assumed, they are subverted, for if A is with every B, and B with C, A will be with every C, but it was with none. Again, if A is with every B, but with no C, B will be with no C, but it was with every C. There is a similar demonstration also if the propositions are not universal, for A, C becomes universal negative, but the other particular affirmative. If then A is with every B, but B with a certain C, A happens to a certain C, but it was with none. Again, if A is with every B, but with no C, B is with no C, but if A is with a certain B, and B with a certain C, there is no syllogism, nor if A is with a certain B, but with no C, will there thus be a syllogism. Hence in that way, but not in this, the propositions are subverted. From what has been said then, it seems clear how, when the conclusion is converted, a syllogism arises in each figure, both when contrarily and when contradictorily to the proposition, and that in the first figure syllogisms are produced through the middle and the last, and the minor premise is always subverted through the middle figure, but the major by the last figure, in the second figure however, through the first and the last, and the minor premise is always subverted through the first figure, but the major through the last, but in the third figure, through the first and through the middle, and the major premise is always subverted through the first, but the minor premise through the middle figure. What therefore conversion is, and how it is effected in each figure, also what syllogism is produced, has been shown. Chapter 11. Of deduction to the impossible in the first figure. A syllogism through the impossible is shown, when the contradiction of the conclusion is laid down, and another proposition is assumed, and it is produced in all the figures, for it is like conversion, except that it differs in so much as that it is converted indeed, when a syllogism has been made, and both propositions have been assumed, but it is deduced to the impossible, when the opposite is not previously acknowledged, but is manifestly true. Now the term subsists similarly in both, the assumption also of both is the same, as for instance, if A is present with every B, but the middle is C, if A is supposed present with every or with no B, but with every C, which was true, it is necessary that C should be with no or not with every B, but this is impossible, so that the supposition is false, wherefore the opposite is true. It is a similar case with other figures, for whatever are capable of conversion are also capable of the syllogism per impossible. All other problems then are demonstrated through the impossible in all the figures, but the universal affirmative is demonstrated in the middle, and in the third, but is not in the first. For let A be supposed not present with every B, or present with no B, and let the other proposition be assumed from either part, whether C is present with every A, or B with every D, for thus there will be the first figure. If then A is supposed not present with every B, there is no syllogism, from whichever part the proposition is assumed, but if it is supposed that A is present with no B, when the proposition B D is assumed, there will indeed be a syllogism of the false, but the thing proposed is not demonstrated, for if A is with no B, but B with every D, A will be with no D, but let this be impossible, therefore it is false that A is with no B. If however it is false that it is present with no B, it does not follow that it is true that it is present with every B, but if C A is assumed, there is no syllogism, neither when A is supposed not present with every B, so that it is manifest that the being present with every is not demonstrated in the first figure per impossible, but to be present with a certain one, and with none, and not with every, is demonstrated, for let A be supposed present with no B, but let B be assumed to be present with every, or with a certain C, Therefore is it necessary that A should be with no, or not with every C, but this is impossible, for let this be true and manifest, that A is with every C, so that if this is false, it is necessary that A should be with a certain B. But if one proposition should be assumed to A, there will not be a syllogism, neither when the contrary to the conclusion is supposed as not to be with a certain one. Wherefore it appears that the contradictory must be supposed. Again, let A be supposed present with a certain B, and C assumed present with every A. Then it is necessary that C should be with a certain B, but let this be impossible, hence the hypothesis is false, and if this be the case, that A is present with no B is true. In like manner, if C, A is assumed negative, if however the proposition be assumed to B, there will not be a syllogism, but if the contrary be supposed, there will be a syllogism, and the impossible demonstration, but what was proposed will not be proved, for let A be supposed present with every B, and let C be assumed present with every A, then it is necessary that C should be with every B, but this is impossible, so that it is false that A is with every B, but it is not yet necessary that if it is not present with every, it is present with no B. The same will happen also if the other proposition is assumed to be, for there will be a syllogism, and the impossible will be proved, but the hypothesis is not subverted, so that the contradictory must be supposed. In order however to prove that A is not present with every B, it must be supposed present with every B, for if A is present with every B, and C with every A, C will be with every B, so that if this impossible, the hypothesis is false. In the same manner, if the other proposition is assumed to be, also if C, A is negative in the same way, for thus there is a syllogism, but if the negative be applied to B, there is no demonstration. If however it should be supposed not present with every, but with some one, there is no demonstration that it is not present with every, but that it is present with none. For if A is with a certain B, but C with every A, C will be with a certain B. If then this is impossible, it is false that A is present with a certain B, so that it is true that it is present with none. This however being demonstrated, what is true is subverted besides, for A was present with a certain B, and with a certain one was not present. Moreover, the impossible does not result from the hypothesis, for it would be false, since we cannot conclude the false from the true, but now it is true, for A is with a certain B, so that it must not be supposed present with a certain, but with every B. The like also will occur, if we should show that A is not present with a certain B, since if it is the same thing not to be with a certain individual, and to be not with every, there is the same demonstration of both. It appears then that not the contrary, but the contradictory must be supposed in all syllogisms, for thus there will be a necessary consequence, and a probable axiom. For if of everything affirmation or negation is true, when it is shown that negation is not, affirmation must necessarily be true. Again, except it is admitted that affirmation is true, it is fitting to admit negation, but it is in neither way fitting to admit the contrary, for neither, if the being present with no one is false, is the being present with every one necessarily true, nor is it probable that if the one is false, the other is true. It is palpable therefore, that in the first figure, all other problems are demonstrated through the impossible, but that the universal affirmative is not demonstrated. Chapter 12. Of the same in the second figure. In the middle, however, and last figure, this also is demonstrated. For let A be supposed not present with every B, but let A be supposed present with every C. Therefore, if it is not present with every B, but is with every C, C is not with every B, but this is impossible, for let it be manifest that C is with every B, wherefore what was supposed is false, and the being present with every individual is true. If however the contrary be supposed, there will be a syllogism, and the impossible, yet the proposition is not demonstrated, for if A is present with no B, but with every C, C will be with no B, but this is impossible. Hence that A is with no B is false. Still it does not follow that if this is false, the being present with every B is true, but when A is with a certain B, let A be supposed present with no B, but with every C. Therefore it is necessary that C should be with no B, so that if this is impossible, A must necessarily be present with a certain B. Still, if it is supposed not present with a certain one, there will be the same as in the first figure. Again, let A be supposed present with a certain B, but let it be with no C. It is necessary then that C should not be with a certain B, but it was with every, so that the supposition is false. A then will be with no B. When however A is not with every B, let it be supposed present with every B, but with no C. Therefore it is necessary that C should be with no B, and this is impossible, wherefore it is true that A is not with every B. Evidently then, all syllogisms are produced through the middle figure. Chapter 13. Of the same in the third figure. Through the last figure also, it will be concluded in a similar way. For let A be supposed not present with a certain B, but C present with every B. A then is not with a certain C, and if this is impossible, it is false that A is not with a certain B, wherefore that it is present with every B is true. If again it should be supposed present with none, there will be a syllogism, and the impossible, but the proposition is not proved. For if the contrary is supposed, there will be the same as in the former syllogisms, but in order to conclude that it is present with a certain one, this hypothesis must be assumed. For if A is with no B, but C with a certain B, A will not be with every C. If then this is false, it is true that A is with a certain B, but when A is with no B, let it be supposed present with a certain one, and let C be assumed present with every B, wherefore it is necessary that A should be with a certain C, but it was with no C, so that it is false that A is with a certain B. If however A is supposed present with every B, the proposition is not demonstrated, but in order to its not being present with every, this hypothesis must be taken. For if A is with every B, and C with a certain B, A is with a certain C, but this was not so, hence it is false that it is with every one, and if thus, it is true that it is not with every B, and if it is supposed present with a certain B, there will be the same things as in the syllogisms above mentioned. It appears then that in all syllogisms through the impossible, the contradictory must be supposed, and it is apparent that in the middle figure, the affirmative is in a certain way demonstrated, and the universal in the last figure. Chapter 14. Of the difference between the ostensive and the deduction to the impossible. A demonstration to the impossible differs from an ostensive in that it admits what it wishes to subvert, leading to an acknowledged falsehood, but the ostensive commences from confessed theses. Both therefore assume two allowed propositions, but the one assumes those from which the syllogism is formed, and the other one of these, and the contradictory of the conclusion. In the one case also, the conclusion need not be known, nor previously assumed that it is, or that it is not, but in the other it is necessary previously to assume that it is not. It is of no consequence, however, whether the conclusion is affirmative or negative, but it will happen the same about both. Now, whatever is concluded ostensively can also be proved per impossible, and what is concluded per impossible may be shown ostensively through the same terms, but not in the same figures. For when the syllogism is in the first figure, the truth will be in the middle, or in the last, the negative indeed in the middle, but the affirmative in the last. When however the syllogism is in the middle figure, the truth will be in the first in all the problems, but when the syllogism is in the last, the truth will be in the first, and in the middle, affirmatives in the first, but negatives in the middle. For let it be demonstrated through the first figure, that A is present with no, or not with every B. The hypothesis then was that A is with a certain B, but C was assumed present with every A, but with no B, for thus there was a syllogism, and also the impossible, but this is the middle figure. If C is with every A, but with no B, and it is evident from these that A is with no B. Likewise, if it has been demonstrated to be not with every, for the hypothesis is that it is with every, but C was assumed present with every A, but not with every B. Also in a similar manner, if C, A, were assumed negative, for thus also there is the middle figure. Again, let A be shown present with a certain B, the hypothesis then is that it is present with none, but B was assumed to be with every C, and A to be with every or with a certain C, for thus the conclusion will be impossible, but this is the last figure. If A and B are with every C. From these then it appears that A must necessarily be with a certain B, and similarly, if B or A is assumed present with a certain C. Again, let it be shown in the middle figure that A is with every B, then the hypothesis was that A is not with every B, but A was assumed present with every C, and C with every B, for thus there will be the impossible, and this is the first figure, if A is with every C, and C with every B. Likewise, if it is demonstrated to be present with a certain one, for the hypothesis was that A was with no B, but A was assumed present with every C, and C with a certain B. But if the syllogism should be negative, the hypothesis was that A is with a certain B, for A was assumed to be with no C, and C with every B, so that there is the first figure. Also, if in like manner the syllogism is not universal, but A is demonstrated not to be with a certain B, for the hypothesis was that A is with every B, but A was assumed present with no C, and C with a certain B, for thus there is the first figure. Again, in the third figure, let A be shown to be with every B. Therefore the hypothesis was that A is not with every B, but C has been assumed to be with every B, and A with every C, for thus there will be the impossible, but this is the first figure. Likewise also, if the demonstration is in a certain thing, for the hypothesis would be that A is with no B, but C has been assumed present with a certain B, and A with every C, but if the syllogism is negative, the hypothesis is that A is with a certain B, but C has been assumed present with no A, but with every B, and this is the middle figure. In like manner also, if the demonstration is not universal, since the hypothesis will be that A is with every B, and C has been assumed present with no A, but with a certain B, and this is the middle figure. It is evident then that we may demonstrate each of the problems through the same terms, both ostensively and through the impossible, and in like manner it will be possible when the syllogisms are ostensive to deduce to the impossible in the assumed terms, when the proposition is taken contradictory to the conclusion, for the same syllogisms arise as those through conversion, so that we have forthwith figures through which each problem will be concluded. It is clear then that every problem is demonstrated by both modes, viz. By the impossible and ostensively, and we cannot possibly separate the one from the other. End of chapter 14 of book 2. Recording in memory of Mitchell Edwards. 15 of book 2 of Prior Analytics by Aristotle, translated by Octavius Owen. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Jeffrey Edwards. Chapter 15 of the method of concluding from opposites in the several figures. In what figure then we may, and in what we may not, syllogize from opposite propositions, will be manifest thus. And I say that opposite propositions are according to diction 4, as for instance, to be present with every is opposed to be present with none, and to be present with every to be present not with every, and to be present with a certain one to to be present with no one, and to be present with a certain one, to be present not with a certain one. In truth, however, they are three, for to be present with a certain one is opposed to being present not with a certain one, according to expression only. But of these I call such contraries as are universal, viz. the being present with every, and the being present with none, as for instance, that every science is excellent, to no science is excellent, but I call the others contradictories. In the first figure then there is no syllogism from contradictory propositions, neither affirmative nor negative. Not affirmative, because it is necessary that both propositions should be affirmative, but affirmation and negation are contradictories, nor negative, because contradictories affirm and deny the same thing of the same, but the middle in the first figure is not predicated of both extremes, but one thing is denied of it, and it is predicated of another. These propositions, however, are not contradictory, but in the middle figure it is possible to produce a syllogism, both from contradictories and from contraries, for let A be good, but science B and C. If then any one assumed that every science is excellent, and also that no science is, A will be with every B, and with no C, so that B will be with no C. No science therefore is science. Example 1. Every science is excellent. No science is excellent, therefore no science is science. It will be the same also, if having assumed that every science is excellent, it should be assumed that medicine is not excellent, for A is with every B, but with no C, so that a certain science will not be science. Example 2. Every science is excellent. No medicine (bracket) a certain science close bracket is excellent. Therefore, no medicine (bracket) a certain science close bracket is science. Likewise, if A is with every C, but with no B, and B is science, C medicine, A opinion. For assuming that no science is opinion, a person would have assumed a certain science to be opinion. Example 3. No science is opinion. All medicine is opinion. Therefore, no medicine is science. This, however, differs from the former in the conversion of the terms. For before the affirmative was joined to B, but now it is to C. Also in a similar manner, if one premise is not universal, for it is always the middle, which is predicated negatively of the one, and affirmatively of the other. Hence it happens that contradictories are concluded, yet not always, nor entirely, but when those which are under the middle so subsist, as either to be the same, or as a whole to a part, otherwise it is impossible, for the propositions will by no means be either contrary or contradictory. In the third figure, there will never be an affirmative syllogism from opposite propositions, for the reason alleged in the first figure, but there will be a negative, both when the terms are and are not universal. For let science be B and C, and medicine A. If then a person assumes that all medicine is science, and that no medicine is science, he would assume B present with every A, and C with no A, so that a certain science will not be science. Example 4. No medicine is science. All medicine is science. Therefore, a certain science is not science. Likewise, if the proposition A, B is not taken as universal, for if a certain medicine is science, and again no medicine is science, it results that a certain science is not science. Example 5. A certain medicine is not science. All medicine is science. Therefore, a certain science is not science. But the propositions are contrary, the terms being universally taken. If, however, one of them is particular, they are contradictory. We must, however, understand that it is possible thus to assume opposites, as we have said, that every science is good, and again, that no science is good, or that a certain science is not good, which does not usually lie concealed. It is also possible to conclude either of the opposites through other interrogations, or as we have observed in the topics, to assume it. Since, however, the oppositions of affirmations are 3, it results that we may take opposites in 6 ways, either with every and with none, or with every and not with every individual, or with a certain and with no one, and to convert this in the terms. Thus A may be with every B, but with no C, or with every C, and with no B, or with the whole of the one, but not with the whole of the other. And again, we may convert this as to the terms. It will be the same also in the third figure, so that it is clear in how many ways, and in what figures it is possible for a syllogism to arise through opposite propositions. But it is also manifest that we may infer a true conclusion from false premises, as we have observed before, but from opposites we cannot. For a syllogism always arises contrary to the fact, as if a thing is good, the conclusion will be that it is not good, or if it is an animal, that it is not an animal, because the syllogism is from contradiction, and the subject terms are either the same, or the one is a whole, but the other a part. It appears also evident that in paralogisms there is nothing to prevent a contradiction of the hypothesis arising, as if a thing is an odd number, that it is not odd, for from opposite propositions there was a contrary syllogism. If then one assumes such, there will be a contradiction of the hypothesis. We must understand, however, that we cannot so conclude contraries from one syllogism, as that the conclusion may be that what is not good is good, or anything of this kind, unless such a proposition is immediately assumed, as that every animal is white and not white, and that man is an animal, but we must either presume contradiction, as that all science is opinion, and is not opinion, and afterwards assume that medicine is a science indeed, but is no opinion, just as elenchi are produced, or conclude from 2 syllogisms. Wherefore, that the things assumed should really be contrary is impossible in any other way than this, as was before observed. Chapter 16. Of the petitio principii, or begging the question. To beg and assume the original question consists, to take the genus of it, in not demonstrating the proposition, and this happens in many ways, whether a person does not conclude at all, or whether he does so through things more unknown, or equally unknown, or whether he concludes what is prior through what is posterior, for demonstration is from things more creditable and prior. Now of these there is no begging the question from the beginning, but since some things are naturally adapted to be known through themselves, and some through other things, for principles are known through themselves, but what are under principles through other things, when a person endeavours to demonstrate by itself what cannot be known by itself, then he begs the original question. It is possible, however, to do this so as immediately to take the thing proposed for granted, and it is also possible that passing to other things which are naturally adapted to be demonstrated by that which was to be investigated, to demonstrate by these the original proposition, as if a person should demonstrate A through B, and B through C, while C was naturally adapted to be proved through A, for it happens that those who thus syllogize prove A by itself. This they do who fancy that they describe parallel lines, for they deceive themselves by assuming such things as they cannot demonstrate unless they are parallel. Hence it occurs to those who thus syllogize to say that each thing is, if it is, and thus everything will be known through itself, which is impossible. If then a man, when it is not proved that A is with C, and likewise with B, begs that A may be admitted present with B, it is not yet evident whether he begs the original proposition, but that he does not prove it is clear. For what is similarly doubtful is not the principle of demonstration. If however B so subsists in reference to C as to be the same, or that they are evidently convertible, or that one is present with the other, then he begs the original question, for that A is with B may be shown through them if they are converted, but now this prevents it, yet not the mode. If however it should do this, it would produce what has been mentioned before, and a conversion would be made through three terms. In like manner, if any one should take B to be present with C, whilst it is equally doubtful if he assumes A also present with C, he does not yet beg the question, but he does not prove it. If however A and B should be the same, or should be converted, or A should follow B, he begs the question from the beginning for the same reason, for what the petitio principii can effect we have shown before, viz. To demonstrate a thing by itself, which is not of itself manifest. If then the petitio principii is to prove by itself what is not of itself manifest, this is not to prove, since both what is demonstrated, and that by which the person demonstrates, are alike dubious, either because the same things are assumed present with the same thing, or the same thing with the same things. In the middle figure, and also in the third, the original question may be the objects of petition, but in the affirmative syllogism, in the third and first figure. Negatively, when the same things are absent from the same, and both propositions are not alike, there is the same result also in the middle figure, because of the non-conversion of the terms in negative syllogisms. A petitio principii, however, occurs in demonstrations as to things which thus exist in truth, but in dialectics as to those which so subsist according to opinion. Chapter 17. a consideration of the syllogism in which it is argued that the false does not happen, "an account of this," that the false does not happen on account of this, which we are accustomed to say frequently in discussion, occurs first in syllogisms leading to the impossible, when a person contradicts that which was demonstrated by a deduction to the impossible, for neither will he who does not contradict assert that it is not false on this account, but that something false was laid down before, nor in the ostensive proof, since he does not lay down a contradiction. Moreover, when anything is ostensively subverted through A, B, C, we cannot say that a syllogism is produced, not on account of what is laid down, for we then say that is not produced on account of this, when this being subverted, the syllogism is nevertheless completed, which is not the case in ostensive syllogisms, since the thesis being subverted, the syllogism which belongs to it will no longer subsist. It is evident then that in syllogisms leading to the impossible, the assertion "not on account of this" is made, and when the original hypothesis so subsists in reference to the impossible, as that both when it is and when it is not, the impossible will nevertheless occur. Hence the clearest mode of the false not subsisting on account of the hypothesis is when the syllogism leading to the impossible does not conjoin with the hypothesis by its media, as we have observed in the topics, for this is to assume as a cause what is not a cause, as if any one wishing to show that the diameter of a square is incommensurate with its side should endeavour to prove the argument of Zeno, that motion has no existence, and to this should deduce the impossible. For the false is by no means whatever connected with what was stated from the first. There is however another mode, if the impossible should be connected with the hypothesis, yet it does not happen on account of that, for this may occur whether we assume the connection up or down, as if A is placed present with B, B with C, and C with D, but this should be false, that B is with D, for if A being subverted, B is nevertheless with C, and C with D, there will not be the false from the primary hypothesis. Or again, if a person should take the connection upward, as if A should be with B, E with A, and F with E, but it should be false that F is with A, for thus there will be no less the impossible, when the primary hypothesis is subverted. It is necessary, however, to unite the impossible with the terms assumed from the beginning, for thus it will be on account of the hypothesis, as to a person taking the connection downward, it ought to be connected with the affirmative term. For if it is impossible that A should be with D, when A is removed, there will no longer be the false, but the connection being assumed in an upward direction, it should be joined with the subject. For if F cannot be with B, when B is subverted, there will no longer be the impossible. The same also occurs when the syllogisms are negative. It appears then that if the impossible is not connected with the original terms, the false does not happen on account of the thesis, or is it that neither thus will the false occur always on account of the hypothesis? For if A is placed present not with B, but with K, and K with C, and this with D, thus also the impossible remains, and in like manner when we take the terms in an upward direction, so that since the impossible happens, whether this is or this is not, it will not be on account of the position. Or if this is not, the false nevertheless arises, it must not be so assumed, as if the impossible will happen from something else being laid down, but when this being subverted, the same impossible is concluded through the remaining propositions, since perhaps there is no absurdity in inferring the false through several hypotheses, as that parallel lines meet, both whether the internal angle is greater than the external, or whether a triangle has more than two right angles. Chapter 18. Of false reasoning. False reasoning arises from what is primarily false, for every syllogism consists of two or more propositions. If then it consists of two, it is necessary that one or both of these should be false, for there would not be a false syllogism from true propositions. But if of more than two, as if C is proved through A, B, and these through D, E, F, G, some one of the above is false, and on this account the reasoning also, since A and B are concluded through them, hence through some one of them the conclusion and the false occur. Chapter 19. Of the prevention of a catasyllogism. To prevent a syllogistical conclusion being adduced against us, we must observe narrowly, when our opponent questions the argument without conclusions, lest the same thing should be twice granted in the propositions, since we know that a syllogism is not produced without a middle, but the middle is that of which we have frequently spoken. But in what manner it is necessary to observe the middle in regard to each conclusion is clear from our knowing what kind of thing is proved in each figure, and this will not escape us in consequence of knowing how we sustain the argument. Still it is requisite when we argue that we should endeavour to conceal that which we direct the respondent to guard against, and this will be done, first if the conclusions are not pre-syllogized, but are unknown when necessary propositions are assumed, and again, if a person does not question those things which are proximate, but such as are especially immediate. For instance, let it be requisite to conclude A of F, and let the media be B, C, D, E. Therefore, we must question whether A is with B, and again, not whether B is with C, but whether D is with E, and afterwards whether B is with C, and so of the rest. If also the syllogism arises through one middle, we must begin with the middle, for thus especially we may deceive the respondent. End of chapter 19 of book 2. Recording in memory of Mitchell Edwards. Of book 2 of Prior Analytics by Aristotle, translated by Octavius Owen. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Jeffrey Edwards. Chapter 20. Of the Linkous. Since, however, we have when, and from what manner of terminal subsistence syllogism is produced, it is also clear when there will and will not be an Linkous, for all things being granted, or the answers being arranged alternately, for instance, the one being negative and the other affirmative, any Linkous may be produced, since there was a syllogism when the terms were as well in this as in that way, so that if what is laid down should be contrary to the conclusion, it is necessary that any Linkous should be produced, for any Linkous is a syllogism of contradiction. If, however, nothing is granted, it is impossible that there should be any Linkous, for there was not a syllogism when all the terms are negative, so that there will neither be any Linkous, for if there is any Linkous, it is necessary there should be a syllogism, but if there is a syllogism, it is not necessary there should be any Linkous. Likewise, if nothing should be universally laid down in the answer, for the determination of the elenchus and of the syllogism will be the same. Chapter 21. Of Deception as to Supposition. Sometimes it happens that as we are deceived in the position of the terms, so also deception arises as to opinion. For example, if the same thing happens to be present with many things primary, and a person should be ignorant of one, and think that it is present with nothing, but should know the other, for let A be present with B, and with C, per se, that is, essentially, and let these in like manner be with every D. If then somebody thinks that A is with every B, and this with every D, but A with no C, and this with every D, he will have knowledge and ignorance of the same thing, as to the same. Again, if one should be deceived about those things which are from the same class, as if A is with B, but this with C, and C with D, and should apprehend A to be with every B, and again with no C, he will at the same time both know and not apprehend its presence. Will he then admit nothing else from these things than that he does not form an opinion on what he knows? For in some way he knows that A is with C through B, just as the particular is known in the universal, so that what he somehow knows, he admits he does not conceive at all, which is impossible. In what, however, we mentioned before, if the middle is not of the same class, it is impossible to conceive both propositions according to each of the media, as if A were with every B, but with no C, and both these with every D. For it happens that the major proposition assumes a contrary, either simply or partially, for if with everything with which B is present, a person thinks A is present, but knows that B is with D, he also will know that A is with D. Hence, if again he thinks that A is with nothing with which C is, he will not think that A is with anything with which B is, but that he who thinks that it is with everything with which B is, should again think that it is not with something with which B is either simply or partially contrary. Thus, however, it is impossible to think, still nothing prevents our assuming one proposition according to each middle, or both according to one, as that A is with every B, and B with D, and again A with no C. For a deception of this kind resembles that by which we are deceived about particulars, as if A is with every B, but B with every C, A will be with every C. If then a man knows that A is with everything with which B is, he knows also that it is with C, still nothing prevents his being ignorant of the existence of C, as if A were two right angles, B a triangle, and C a perceptible triangle. Example 1. Every triangle has angles equal to two right angles, bracket, known, close bracket. This is a triangle, bracket, unknown, close bracket. Therefore, this has angles equal to two right angles, known by universal / unknown by particular knowledge. For a man may think that C does not exist, knowing that every triangle has two equal to right angles, hence he will know and be ignorant of the same thing at once. For to know that every triangle has angles equal to two right is not a simple thing, but in one respect arises from possessing universal science, in another particular science. Thus therefore he knows by universal science that C has angles equal to two right angles, but by particular science he does not know it, so that he will not hold contraries. In like manner is the reasoning in the Meno, that discipline is reminiscence, for it never happens that we have a pre-existent knowledge of particulars, but together with induction receive the science of particulars as it were by recognition. Since some things we immediately know, as that there are angles equal to two right angles, if we know that what we see is a triangle, and in like manner as to other things. By universal knowledge then we observe particulars, but we do not know them by an innate peculiar knowledge, hence we may be deceived about them, yet not after a contrary manner, but while possessing the universal, yet are deceived in the particular. It is the same also as to what we have spoken of, for the deception about the middle is not contrary to science about syllogism, nor the opinion as to each of the middles, still nothing prevents one who knows that A is with the whole of B, and this again with C, thinking that A is not with C, as he who knows that every mule is barren, and that this animal is a mule, may think that this is pregnant, for he does not know that A is with C, from not at the same time surveying each. Hence it is evident that if he knows one of the propositions, but is ignorant of the other, he will be deceived as to how the universal subsists with reference to the particular sciences. For we know nothing of those things which fall under the senses as existent apart from sense, not even if we happen to have perceived it before, unless in so far as we possess universal and peculiar knowledge, and not in that we energize. For to know is predicated triply, either as to the universal, or to the peculiar knowledge, or as to energizing, so that to be deceived is likewise in as many ways. Nothing therefore prevents a man both knowing and being deceived about the same thing, but not in a contrary manner, and this happens also to him, who knows each proposition, yet has not considered before, for thinking that a mule is pregnant, he has not knowledge in energy, nor again on account of opinion has he deception contrary to knowledge, since deception contrary to universal knowledge is syllogism. Notwithstanding, whoever thinks that the very being of good is the very being of evil, will apprehend that there is the same essence of good and of evil, for let the essence of good be A, and the essence of evil B, and again let the essence of good be C. Since then he thinks that B and C are the same, he will also think that C is B, and again in a similar manner that B is A, wherefore that C is A. Example 2. He thinks the essence of evil is the essence of good. He thinks the essence of good is the essence of evil. Therefore, he thinks the essence of good is the essence of good. For just as if it were true that of what C is predicated, B is, and of what B is, A is, it was also true that A is predicated of C. So too in the case of the verb, to opine, in like manner as regards the verb, to be, for C and B being the same, and again B and A, C also is the same as A. Likewise, as regards to opine, is then this necessary, if any one should grant the first? But perhaps that is false, that any one should think that the essence of good is the essence of evil, unless accidentally, for we may opine this in many ways, but we must consider it better. Chapter 22. On the conversion of the extremes in the first figure. When the extremes are converted, the middle must necessarily be converted with both, for if A is present with C through B, if it is converted, and C is with whatever A is, B also is converted with A, and with whatever A is present. B also is through the middle C, and C is converted with B through the middle A. The same will occur with negatives, as if B is with C, but A is not with B, neither will A be with C. If then B is converted with A, C also will be converted with A, for let B not be with A, neither then will C be with A, since B was with every C, and if C is converted with B, the latter is also converted with A, for of whatever B is predicated, C also is, and if C is converted with A, B also is converted with A, for with whatever B is present, C also is, but C is not present with what A is. This also alone begins from the conclusion, but the others not similarly, as in the case of an affirmative syllogism. Again, if A and B are converted, and C and D likewise, but A or C must necessarily be present with every individual, B and D also will so subsist, as that one of them will be present with every individual, for since B is present with whatever A is, and D with whatever C is, but A or C with every individual, and not both at the same time, it is evident that B or D is with every individual, and not both of them at the same time, for two syllogisms are conjoined. Again, if A or B is with every individual, and C or D, but they are not present at the same time, if A and C are converted, B also and D are converted, since if B is not present with a certain thing with which D is, it is evident that A is present with it, but if A is, C also will be, for they are converted so that C and D will be present at the same time, but this is impossible, as if what is unbegotten is incorruptible, and what is incorruptible unbegotten, it is necessary that what is begotten should be corruptible, and the corruptible begotten, but when A is present with the whole of B and C, and is predicated of nothing else, and B also is with every C, it is necessary that A and B should be converted, as since A is predicated of B, C alone, but B itself is predicated both of itself and of C, it is evident that of those things of which A is predicated, of all these B will also be predicated, except of A itself. Again, when A and B are with the whole of C, and C is converted with B, it is necessary that A should be with every B, for since A is with every C, but C with B, in consequence of reciprocity, A will also be with every B, but when of two opposites A is preferable to B, and D to C likewise, if A, C are more eligible than B, D, A is preferable to D. In like manner, A should be followed and B avoided, since they are opposites, and C is to be similarly avoided, and D to be pursued, for these are opposed. If then A is similarly eligible with D, B also is similarly to be avoided with C, each opposite to each. In like manner, what is to be avoided to what is to be pursued, hence both are similar, A, C, with B, D, but because the one are more eligible than the other, they cannot be similarly eligible, for else B, D would be similarly eligible with A, C. If however D is preferable to A, B also is less to be avoided than C, for the less is opposed to the less, and the greater good and the less evil are preferable to the less good and the greater evil, wherefore the whole B, D is preferable to A, C. Now however, this is not the case, hence A is preferable to D, consequently C is less to be avoided than B. If then every lover according to love chooses A, that is to be in such a condition as to be gratified, and C not to be gratified, rather than be gratified, which is D, and yet not be in a condition to be gratified, which is B, it is evident that A, i.e. to be in a condition to be gratified, is preferable to being gratified. To be loved then is preferable according to love to intercourse, wherefore love is rather the cause of affection than of intercourse, but if it is especially the cause of this, this also is the end, wherefore intercourse either, in short, is not, or is for the sake of affection, since the other desires and arts are thus produced. How therefore terms subsist as to conversion, also in their being more eligible or more to be avoided, has been shown. Chapter 23. Of Induction. We must now show that not only dialectic and demonstrative syllogisms are produced through the above named figures, but that rhetorical are also, and in short, every kind of demonstration, and by every method. For we believe all things either through syllogism or from induction. Induction, then, and the inductive syllogism is to prove one extreme in the middle through the other, as if B is the middle of A, C, and we show through C that A is with B, for thus we make inductions. Thus let A be long-lived, B void of bile, C everything long-lived, as man, horse, mule. A then is present with the whole of C, for everything void of bile is long-lived, but B also, or that which is void of bile, is present with every C. If then C is converted with B, and does not exceed the middle, it is necessary that A should be with B, for it has been before shown that when any two things are present with the same thing, and the extreme is convertible with one of them, that the other predicate will also be present with that which is converted. We must however consider C as composed of all singulars, for induction is produced through all. Example 1. Every man, horse, mule is long-lived. Whatever is void of bile is man, horse, mule. Therefore, whatever is void of bile is long-lived. A syllogism of this kind, however, is of the first and immediate proposition, for of those which have a middle, the syllogism is through the middle, but of those where there is not a middle, it is by induction. In some way also induction is opposed to syllogism, for the latter demonstrates the extreme of the third through the middle, but the former the extreme of the middle through the third. To nature therefore the syllogism produced through the middle is prior or more known, but to us that by induction is more evident. Chapter 24. Of Example. Example is when the extreme is shown to be present with the middle through something similar to the third, but it is necessary to know that the middle is with the third, and the first with what is similar. For example, let A be bad, B to make war upon neighbours, C the Athenians against the Thebans, D the Thebans against the Phocians. If then we wish to show that it is bad to war against the Thebans, we must assume that it is bad to war against neighbours, but the demonstration of this is from similars, as that the war by the Thebans against the Phocians was bad. Since then war against neighbours is bad, but that against the Thebans is against neighbours, it is evidently bad to war against the Thebans, so that it is evident that B is with C, and with D, since both are to war against neighbours, and that A is with D, for the war against the Phocians was not advantageous to the Thebans, but that A is with B will be shown through D. In the same manner also, if the demonstration of the middle as to the extreme should be through many similars, wherefore it is evident that example is neither as part to a whole, nor as whole to a part, but as part to part, when both are under the same thing, but one is known. It (example) also differs from induction, because the latter shows from all individuals that the extreme is present with the middle, and does not join the syllogism to the extreme, but the former both joins it and does not demonstrate from all individuals. End of chapter 24 of book 2. Recording in memory of Mitchell Edwards. 25 of book 2 of Prior Analytics by Aristotle, translated by Octavius Owen. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Jeffrey Edwards. Chapter 25 of Abduction. Abduction is when it is evident the first is present with the middle, but it is not evident that the middle is with the last, though it is similarly credible, or more so than the conclusion. Moreover, if the media of the last and of the middle be few, for it by all means happens that we shall be nearer to knowledge. For instance, let A be what may be taught, B science, C justice. That science then may be taught is clear, but not whether justice is science. If therefore B, C is equally or more credible than A, C, it is abduction, for we are nearer knowledge because of our assuming A, C, not possessing science before. Example 1. Every science may be taught, known. All justice is science, equally or more credible than the conclusion, therefore all justice may be taught, unknown. Or again, if the media of B, C should be few, for thus we are nearer knowledge, as if D should be to be squared, E a rectilinear figure, and F a circle, then if of E, F there is only one middle, for a circle to become equal to a rectilinear figure through lunula will be a thing near to knowledge. Example 2. Every rectilinear figure may be squared, known. Every circle may become a rectilinear figure, proved through one middle, i.e. per unulas, every circle may be squared (bracket), this is proved through many media, close bracket. But when neither B C is more credible than A C, nor the media fewer, I do not call this abduction, nor when B C is immediate, for such a thing is knowledge. Chapter 26. Of Objection. Objection is a proposition contrary to a proposition. It differs, however, from a proposition because objection may be partial, but proposition cannot be so at all, or not in universal syllogisms. Objection indeed is advanced in two ways, and by two figures. In two ways, because every objection is either universal or particular, and by two figures, because they are used opposite to the proposition, and opposites are concluded in the first and third figure alone. When then a person requires it to be admitted that anything is present with every individual, we object either that it is with none, or that it is not with a certain one, and of these the being present with none is shown by the first figure, but that it is not with a certain one by the last. For instance, let A be, there is one science, and B contraries. When therefore a person advances that there is one science of contraries, it is objected either that there is not the same science of opposites altogether, but contraries are opposites, so that there is the first figure. Example 1. Proposition: there is one science of contraries. Objection: there is not one science of opposites. Contraries are opposites. Therefore, there is not one science of contraries. Or that there is not one science of the known and of the unknown, and this is the third figure. For of C, that is, of the known, and of the unknown, it is true that they are contraries, but that there is one science of them is false. Example 2. Proposition: there is one science of contraries. Objection: there is not one science of the known and of the unknown. The known and the unknown are contraries. There is not one science of contraries. Again, in like manner, in a negative proposition, for if any one asserts that there is not one science of contraries, we say either that there is the same science of all opposites, or that there is of certain contraries, as of the salubrious and of the noxious. That there is therefore one science of all things is by the first figure, but that there is of certain by the third. In short, in all disputations it is necessary that he who universally objects should apply a contradiction of the propositions to the universal. Example 3. Proposition: therefore, there is not one science of contraries. Objection: there is one science of opposites. Contraries are opposites. Therefore, there is one science of contraries. Proposition the same. Objection: there is one science of the salubrious and noxious. The salubrious and noxious are contraries. Therefore, there is one science of certain contraries. As if some one should assert that there is not the same science of all contraries, the objector should say that there is one of opposites, for thus it is necessary that there should be the first figure, since the middle becomes an universal to that which was proposed at first, but he who objects in part must contradict that which is universal. of which the proposition is stated, as that there is not the same science of the known and the unknown, for the contraries are universal with reference to these. The third figure is also produced, for what is particularly assumed is the middle, for instance, the known and the unknown, as from what we may infer a contrary syllogistically, from the same we endeavour to urge objections. Wherefore we adduce then objections from these figures only, for in these alone opposite syllogisms are constructed, since we cannot conclude affirmatively through the middle figure. Moreover, even if it were possible, yet the objection in the middle figure would require more extensive discussion, as if any one should not admit A to be present with B, because C is not consequent to it. For this is manifest through other propositions. The objection, however, must not be diverted to other things, but should forthwith have the other proposition apparent, wherefore also from this figure alone there is not a sign. We must consider also other objections, as those adduced from the contrary, from the similar, and from what is according to opinion, also whether it is possible to assume a particular objection from the first, or a negative from the middle figure. Chapter 27. Of Likelihood, Sign, and Enthymeme. Likelihood and sign, however, are not the same, but the likely is a probable proposition for what men know to have generally happened or not, or to be or not to be. This is a likelihood, for instance, that the envious hate, or that lovers love. But a sign seems to be a demonstrative proposition, necessary or probable for that which, when it exists, a thing is, or which when it has happened, before or after a thing has happened, this is a sign of a thing happening, or being. Now an enthymeme is a syllogism from likelihoods, or signs, but a sign is assumed triply, in as many ways as the middle in the figures, for it is either as in the first, or as in the middle, or as in the third, as to show that a woman is pregnant because she has milk is from the first figure, for the middle is to have milk. Let A be to be pregnant, B to have milk, C a woman. Example 1. Whatever woman has milk is pregnant. This woman has milk. Therefore, this woman is pregnant. But that wise men are worthy, for Pittacus is a worthy man, is through the last figure. Let A be worthy, B wise men, C Pittacus. It is true then A and B are predicated of C, except that they do not assert the one because they know it, but the other they assume. Example 2. Pittacus is a worthy man. Pittacus is a wise man. Therefore, wise are worthy men. But that a woman is pregnant because she is pale would be through the middle figure, for since paleness is a consequence of pregnancy, and also attends this woman, they fancy it proved that she is pregnant. Let A be paleness, to be pregnant B, a woman C. Example 3. Whatever woman is pregnant is pale. This woman is pale. Therefore, this woman is pregnant. If then one proposition should be enunciated, there is only a sign, but if the other also be assumed, there is a syllogism, as for instance, that Pittacus is liberal, for the ambitious are liberal, and Pittacus is ambitious, or again, that the wise are good, for Pittacus is good and also wise. Thus therefore syllogisms are produced, except indeed that the one in the first figure is incontrovertible if it be true, for it is universal, but that through the last is controvertible, though the conclusion should be true, because the syllogism is not universal, nor to the purpose, for if Pittacus is worthy, it is not necessary that on this account other wise men also should be worthy. But that which is by the middle figure is always and altogether controvertible, for there is never a syllogism when the terms thus subsist, for it is not necessary, if she who is pregnant be pale, and this woman be pale, that this woman should be pregnant. What is true therefore will be in all the figures, but they have the above named differences. Either therefore the sign must be thus divided, but of these the middle must be assumed, as the proof positive, for the proof positive, they say, is that which produces knowledge, but the middle is especially a thing of this kind, or we must call those from the extremes, signs, but what is from the middle a proof positive, for that is most probable, and for the most part true, which is through the first figure. We may however form a judgment of the disposition by the body, if a person grants that whatever passions are natural change at once the body and the soul, since perhaps one who has learned music has changed his soul in some respect, but this passion is not of those which are natural to us, but such as angers and desires which belong to natural emotions. If therefore this should be granted, and one thing should be a sign of one passion, and we are able to lay hold of the peculiar passion and sign of each genus, we shall be able to conjecture from nature. For if a peculiar passion is inherent in a certain individual genus, as fortitude in lions, it is necessary also that there should be a certain sign, for it is supposed that they, the body and soul, sympathize with each other, and let this be the having great extremities, which also is contingent to other, not whole, genera. For the sign is thus peculiar, because the passion is a peculiarity of the whole genus, and is not the peculiarity of it alone, as we are accustomed to say. The same sign then will also be inherent in another genus, and man will be brave, and some other animal, it will then possess that sign, for there was one sign of one passion. If then these things are so, and we can collect such signs in those animals, which have one peculiar passion alone, but each passion has its own sign, since it is necessary that it should have one, we may be able to conjecture the nature from the bodily frame. But if the whole genus have two peculiarities, as a lion has fortitude and liberality, how shall we know which of those signs that are peculiarly consequent is the sign, if either passion? Shall we say that we may know this if both are inherent in something else, but not wholly, and in what each is not inherent wholly, when they have the one, they have not the other? For if a lion is brave, but not generous, but has this from two signs, it is evident that in a lion also this is the sign of fortitude. But to form a judgment of the natural disposition by the bodily frame is for this reason in the first figure, because the middle reciprocates with the major term, but exceeds the third, and does not reciprocate with it, as for instance, let fortitude be A, great extremities B, and C a lion, wherefore B is present with every individual with which C is, but with others also, and A is with every individual of that with which B is present, and with no more, but is converted, for if it were not, there would not be one sign of one passion. Example 4. Whatever has great extremities is brave. Some man has great extremities, therefore some man is brave. End of chapter 27 of book 2, and end of Prior Analytics by Aristotle. Recording in memory of Mitchell Edwards.